Hello, and welcome to another in the historical video series of the Florida Bar Center for Professionalism. My name is Beverly Lewis. I'm with the center staff. Today is February 1st, 2001. We're standing across from the Supreme Court building here in Tallahassee, Florida. Let me now introduce to you Justice Peggy Quince. Justice Quince, thank you so much for letting us come and talk to you today, to agreeing to be one of our historical video series for the Florida Bar.
It's my pleasure.
It's delightful to see you in your native habitat. This is not a room that you're usually in, is it?
Well, you know, I used to come to this room for years. I argued a number of cases here before I ever even thought about being a member of the court, from about 1980 to about 1993. So I spent a lot of time in this room waiting for court to start.
Let's talk a little bit about the early days. How did your professional career begin? I noticed that you have a degree in zoology. Is that right?
That's correct.
That's kind of a step, or maybe not.
Well, it really was more than a step. It was quite a turn. I went to college with the idea of going to medical school or getting an advanced degree and doing genetic research. I had enjoyed science all through high school, participating in science fairs, and so I thought that was what I wanted to do. But I went to Howard University undergraduate school, and I was there in the mid-'60s, and we all know what was going on in the mid-'60s, early '70s. The civil rights movement was at its height. And every time there was a sit-in or a lock-in or whatever, who was there? Lawyers and law students. And that's where my interest in the law started. And I thought about it and decided that instead of going to medical school or getting an advanced science degree, that I'd go to law school. Because that's where people's lives were really being affected.
Sounds like there was one zoology student in those lock-ins. Did you participate politically?
Oh, yeah. We had a big sit-in on campus where, Stokely Carmichael came and a lot of other people from that civil rights era. And I participated in that. And it just brought home to me how important it was for all of us to be aware of the law and how to use the law to make changes, both social and other ways. And so I decided that law school would be better than medical school. But sometimes I think back on that decision because the part of genetics that I was really interested in had to do with sickle cell disease. And I knew that disease affected blacks generally. And I have a child who has sickle cell disease. And so one of those things that I was talking about earlier, when you think back on your life, I often wonder if I might have been able to make some difference in the research that's going on in sickle cell disease.
It's interesting to see the way the paths have led. After you left Howard then, what was the next step in your education?
I went to Catholic University in Washington, D.C. also, law school. And that was a very interesting time. That's when I really got involved in legal services. And, it was brought home to me that everyone can't afford the services of lawyers. When I was growing up, I honestly never had any contact with lawyers or the legal system. So I was not aware of, that it costs so much money, actually, to hire a lawyer, to go to court, to have your rights vindicated. But working at legal services is what brought it home to me. The university actually had a neighborhood legal services clinic, and I worked in it one summer, and I also took 6 hours of credit working in the legal services clinic.
And after that?
Well, after I graduated from law school, I actually went to work for the District of Columbia government. They had just instituted a new rent control law. And here again, the prices of apartments were sort of skyrocketing at that point. And the city felt they needed to put some kind of control on it. And it was another area where I saw what was happening to the poor, really. They were being priced out of the apartment market. So that was another of those instances where I really got a good look at how the law can be used to help and those who are disadvantaged.
Were there people you encountered during that time who encouraged you in your decision to go on?
Well, you know, I have to start out with just even from elementary school, I had some really terrific teachers who truly were interested in students. And they encouraged us to live up to our potential, really, is what it amounts to. You can do what you want to do. That was their theme. That was what they tried to instill in us. And I have to give a lot of credit to the teachers I had from elementary school. We didn't have junior high schools then, so from elementary school to high school, and even in college, when you went to talk to your professors, they let you know that it's up to you. You take what you have and maximize it. And don't let anything get in the way, and don't use excuses. And so I have to say that the public school teachers that I encountered in my life were just top-notch and really let me know that it's up to you. Do it if you want to do it. And if you don't do it, don't make excuses.
It's a powerful encouragement to educators,
Yeah.
I would say. How about just, other than maybe mentors in the legal profession, just plain heroes, personal? How about anyone in your family who might have motivated you or?
Well, I can never not tell people about my dad. He was just a terrific guy. He was a single parent at a time when, not to be sexist about it, men were not the ones who were left raising children. And there were 5 of us. I was next to the oldest, so second. And my mother and father marriage broke up when I was in the 2nd grade. So there were 3 others who were younger than me. In fact, my younger brother was probably about 2 when this all happened. So my father was left with a lot of young children to care for. And he was not, an educated person, but he understood and appreciated the need for education. And he instilled in all of us that burning desire to do and to do better. And without that kind of encouragement, there were so many people I grew up with who never finished high school, who just got kind of lost along the wayside. And I think without the encouragement of my father, that could have just as easily happened to me. And so he's just the biggest hero in the world to me. But there have been other people, like I said, teachers along the way who have helped and encouraged. And then even when I got into the legal profession, there were others. I worked for the Attorney General's office for almost 14 years before I was appointed to the 2nd District Court of Appeal. And there were just some terrific lawyers there who were always willing to help you. I was a pretty new lawyer when I started there, and people will just take you by the hand and help you. And that's what I think is often missing when you have a lot of young lawyers who, right out of law school, open their own office. If there is anything that I would like to see discouraged is that kind of activity. I know that there are situations when people feel that that's what they want to do, and they sometimes have no other option but to open their own office. But I think it really helps to have other people that you can talk to. You don't come out of law school knowing, I believe, how to practice law. And if there's someone there to help you, it's just so much better than doing it all on your own. And so I just would really like to see every lawyer who comes out of law school have someone or someones that they can talk to and really understand what it means to practice law. And to really just simple things, where the courthouse is, filing a complaint, where in the courthouse you go to file your complaint, making sure that you know that your answer is due within a certain time period, making sure that you file your discovery motions, those kinds of things. And when you're alone, so you can so often overlook some really important small details.
There have been times and places in which young attorneys, after they graduate from law school and before they pass the bar or practice, must go through a mentoring period. What do you feel about that? Do you have any thoughts about whether that ought to be mandatory or not, or is it just a very good idea?
It certainly is a good idea. And short of it being mandatory, I think maybe we should have more practical courses in law school, maybe. Sure, we all need to learn and study the law, certainly the basics of the law, but I think we need to learn more about the mechanics of the law also. And so short of mandatory mentoring, maybe mandatory courses in law school where you actually learn the practicalities of the law.
The Professionalism Center, there are works in progress. The committees and the commission have set up mentoring programs in 3 locations throughout the state. Mm-hmm. And they report a wonderful response from the attorneys, but now they're trying to get mentees, they're trying to get protégés. Would you have any encouragement, any words to say to, if you could, to those who might be considering being the protégés in these programs?
Well, I would just tell them that it cannot hurt to learn as much as they can about the law. As I said, the practical part of the law. And I think that's what mentoring will actually give you, a practical understanding of what it is you're about to embark upon. And practicing law is not easy. And there are multiple aspects to every case that you take on. And I think that if young lawyers had someone who could really explain that to them and actually take them through the steps that it takes, that they'll see that I just cannot really do this on my own just out of law school. It's hard to know what to tell people that would really make them understand that the law is so multifaceted that no one individual is going to be able to remember and get it all together, and that you are much better off if you have someone there to help you. Just being able to talk to someone really is so helpful. One time when I had a practice of my own. I was in Bradenton, and I had an office in the old professional building in Bradenton. It was very lonely. You know, when an idea came to me, there was no one to bounce that idea off of. Is this a good idea or not? And you don't want to test that idea sometimes in the courtroom. You might want to test it with someone else. It is just so important to have someone that you can turn to. And I think that the mentoring would give you that someone.
Thinking back to the office in Bradenton and since, you've seen changes in the legal profession over the years. What changes have been notable to you? What do you see?
Well, of course, the most obvious change is the number of women in the profession. When I was in law school, I think it may have been beginning to change then, but there certainly was not the numbers that you see in law schools now. I understand in some law schools you have 50% or more of the class women. And that certainly was not the case back in the early 70s when I went to law school. And of course, it's not only women, but the diversity and ethnic groups, racial groups that are going to law school. And so those are the truly obvious changes that you see in the profession.
And what's your opinion of that change?
Well, I think it can only be good for all of us. The demographics of the country has changed over the years. There are more and more, I went to a conference recently, and I'm trying to find a word other than minority. I went to a conference recently, and they told me that the term minority is really not a good term because, the flip side of that is majority, so somehow that puts you at a disadvantage already. So I'm looking for another word other than minority. So I'll use varying ethnic groups. And we see that in our country. We have more, the black population has increased, the Hispanic population certainly has increased, the Asian population in this country. And so the profession has to reflect the demographics of the country because people like to see people of their own backgrounds as judges, as lawyers, as the personnel in the courtroom, whatever. And I think it can only help when the profession becomes as diverse as the population.
I wonder if you had recommendations you could give to judges or lawyers or law schools on how to really improve the legal profession as it stands today, or legal training. What would you suggest?
Well, first of all, I like to start off with at least the image of the legal profession. And I think that we've heard enough of the lawyer jokes over the years so that it really has almost taken over as the image of the profession. And people don't see a lot of the good things that go on in the profession. All the pro bono hours that attorneys put in. There's always a big article about it in the Florida Bar News, but how widely spread is the Florida Bar News? Is there a big article in all the major newspapers that talk about all the hours that lawyers give to their communities? And when it's actually happening, are there ever really good articles about a particular lawyer or a particular group of lawyers doing whatever it is that they're doing to aid their communities? And I think that if we could have some more positive publicity about the good things that lawyers are doing, it would help to, in my mind, reshape the public's image. When they see the notorious trials on TV, and we know that a lot of people get all of their information from the TV and newspaper, they can't help but wonder sometimes, what are they doing? So they need to see the other side of it. Sometimes some of that workaday things that are not very exciting, but certainly has a tremendous impact on the lives of the individuals who are actually appearing in that particular case. As for what lawyers, judges, and law schools can do, I think to improve the profession, I think, as I said earlier, I would love to see the law schools at least get into to more practical things. You know, when you go to medical school, not only do you go to class, but once your classwork is over, you actually start working in the hospital and, you know, seeing patients and helping doctors, other doctors, diagnose what is wrong with patients. And it just seems to me that if we had a practical end of law school, that it could only help that when the lawyer is actually out there practicing law, they will know, they will have a better understanding of what it is they're actually doing and how to do it.
Makes a great deal of sense. What do you think we're doing right? What is going well in the legal profession? What is being done correctly in your view?
Well, I think one of the things that we're doing correctly, and of course there's always room for improvement, is that we are attempting to make sure that there is widespread access to the legal profession. Because I really believe that if you help those and make sure those who have the least resources be able to come into court and vindicate their rights, then the rights of everyone is being vindicated. So I think that that is one of the truly good things about the profession, is that we have organizations like legal services and the legal aids and the bar, who helps to fund these kinds of organizations. We have these groups out there that take on the cases that when people cannot afford to go to private attorneys.
I suppose the difference, we should talk a little bit about the difference between ethics and professionalism. I'm interested in your definition of both of those words.
I think ethics really is the minimum standard of conduct for our profession. But professionalism is the ideal standard of conduct. Quite frankly, that's how I look at the two. And I think that when you read, and I've done it a lot over the last couple of years, the Creed of Professionalism that's published as a part of the Florida Bar Journal. I mean, they use words, if you'll excuse me for a moment, they use words like diligent and punctual, that integrity, honor, fair play, public service, and the public good. These are the ideals of the profession. And it ends with, and my favorite, my word is my bond. And if every lawyer lived by that creed, I think we wouldn't hear any more lawyer jokes. I think that's
pretty powerful. The core beliefs that have helped you through your life, that have enabled you to come to this demanding point in your life, tell us about those.
I think the do unto others is truly a driving force. You can't hurt your brother because you wouldn't want them to hurt you. And I just think that if you live by that kind of principle, then you will stop and evaluate when something is questionable. So that's the major principle that I try to live by: do unto others as you would have them do unto you. And then, there are all kinds of other things. I think equality and justice and those kinds of principles, you have to live by and understand those kinds of principles too, I think, in order to be successful and do well in any kind of profession.
What are the principles for you based on? Are there certain fundamental absolutes in your life without which you could not go on?
I'm not exactly sure what that means.
I'm not either, but I'm so intrigued to find how many people talk about faith in these conversations.
Mm-hmm. And I certainly have faith. I do believe, that in a higher being, and that we were all put here for a purpose. And one of the purposes that I think we all are put here for is to help each other. And I guess that comes out of my faith and religious background, because the whole point of religion and faith is love. And so if you build your life on the principle of love, I love myself and I should love you just as I love myself. And we don't make that mark all of the time. But if that is what drives you, and you attempt at least to live by that as much as possible, then I think that we're all on the right path at least. And yes, faith, love.
Justice Quince, what areas do you think could be improved in the legal profession?
Recently I was a part of the Judicial Management Council, and we did some town meetings around the state in 4 or 5 different areas. People who are users of the system came in, and we discussed what they see as problems when they have to go to court. And I think if we could address a couple of those problems, it would truly be a tremendous improvement for the profession. And those 2 problems are timeliness and costs. You always hear from the users of the system that it takes too long for their case to actually come before a judge and a decision is made. And that in the meantime, the cost for that case is increasing. And over the years, of course, we have seen hourly rates for attorneys increase tremendously. So if we could get, and I don't know what the answer is, and I don't know how you actually do it, but if we could somehow learn to move the cases along more efficiently, faster pace, and keep the costs down, then I think that it would improve not only the profession, but the image of the profession.
Now, in New Orleans, you get something they call a lagniappe, which is something extra, so I'm going to get a lagniappe question. Lagniappe. Question here, because I can't resist. You've been a Supreme Court justice for a couple of years now. Mm-hmm. You've been through one of the most amazing times in the history of the United States with the presidential elections contested. Tell me what your thoughts are now, 2 years into this extraordinary work. What is different? What has changed in your mind and your heart?
I think one of the things that has come out of this whole election case is that it has brought home to me how important, how truly important every decision is that comes from this court. And I mean, I was always aware that, this is at least in this state, generally, the court of last resort, unless you have a constitutional issue, and then you might be able to persuade the United States Supreme Court to take it. But it's really, that's the only thing I can tell you. It really brought home to me how important it is to deliberate and come to the best resolution that you can of every case that comes before this court. It's just so important to so many people. It's important to the litigants in that particular case, but it might have some real widespread importance to most of the people in the state.
You talked about the image of the profession. Certainly the whole world was watching the Supreme Court. How do you think professionalism was served as people saw the deliberations, saw the attorneys in play in this issue?
Well, I hope what they saw is a court that made itself familiar with the issues that was involved, the law pertaining to those issues, and that they saw the same kind of preparation on the part of the lawyers who presented those issues and that law to the court. And, appellate work is always so much more, less, I guess, dramatic than what you see in the trial courts. And I think that when you watch appellate court proceedings, that you see that the legal profession really is there's a lot of dignity involved in the profession, and I think that the proceedings that took place in this court certainly demonstrated that quality.
The final question that I'm to ask intrigues me. If you were absolutely guaranteed that your advice would be followed, what advice would you give to those in the legal profession?
Oh. I think that I would tell everyone to keep fighting. To keep fighting for the rights of those who are less fortunate than we are, to keep fighting to improve the image of the profession, and to keep fighting for the independence of the judicial branch of government. And I think it's so important. This country was founded on the principles of the separations of power. We have our executive branch, we have our legislative branch, and we have our judicial branch. And that has worked well for us for over 200 years. And I think that we need to make sure that that continues to be the driving principle of our country. And lawyers have always been in the forefront of that fight. And so those are the things that I would say to the members of this profession.
Justice Quince, thank you very much for sharing your time with us today.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you.